What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the single game showdown slate on Thursday Night Football, the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. In this video, we will discuss the injuries that impact tonight's slate. We will go over our core plays and lineup construction tips for low risk contests. And then, of course, why you are all here. We will talk about the strategies and picks and tips to help you win the biggest prizes that DraftKings and FanDuel have to offer tonight. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. And let's not waste time. Let's jump into it and let's look at the injuries for tonight's game, Miami and Buffalo. We'll start on the visiting Miami Dolphins, and their tight end Darren Waller remains out. Hasn't been a great signing so far. He unretired, signed with the Dolphins, going to be out once again. So let's look at the tight end usage through the first two games for Miami. Tanner Conner, who has been their starting tight end, has run a route on 76% of Tua's dropbacks so far through 2 weeks, and he's earned 4 targets as a result. Now, as everyone's likely going to want to jam in the studs tonight in DFS, they're going to be looking for value plays. And Tanner Conner as a starting tight end, yes, only 2 targets per game, $800 will certainly achieve that, and expect him to be relatively popular. Expect him to be really popular in higher dollar contests and smaller field GPPs. We look at over on FanDuel and we look at Tanner Conner, and he is 2,400 in MVP, which means he is 1,600 in the flex. Also incredibly affordable over here. Now his backup is Julian Hill, who has run a route on 39% of Tua's dropbacks, but hasn't done anything. Hasn't drawn a single target through 2 games. He's $1,400. If you're making a bunch of lineups, maybe he's a guy you can pivot away from, Tanner Conner. And then while he's technically a fullback, Alec Ingold, he runs some deeper routes, plays some tight end in this offense. He's drawn 2 targets per game, so 4 total targets. He's almost the minimum. He's $400, and he's running around on 25% of Tua's dropbacks. So another 2%, 1% own a pivot away from Tanner Conner if you're thinking in that direction. Now, in the backfield, Jalen Wright returns after missing the first 2 games. Had a minor knee issue in the preseason, had a minor procedure to clean it up. He's back and good to go. Now, he was slated to be the backup running back, complimentary running back to Devon Achane at the start of the offseason back in, May? But due to his injury and the full downhill hype train of Ollie Gordon, kind of fell out of favor, but now he's back. And we don't really know how this backfield is going to be split otherwise outside of Devon Achane. But right at $2,800 on DraftKings, and let's go to FanDuel. Jalen Wright is just $3,000, so relatively the same price. We assume he'll take over the running back 2 role, but he could split it with Ollie Gordon. He could just be relegated to running back 3. Although I will say, the fact that Wright has returned maybe puts a dent in the crazy usage that Devon Achane has seen through 2 games. 93% of the snaps last week. They wanted to give Jalen Wright more work. At least that was what the organization was saying throughout the entire offseason. So if anything, even if we can't figure out if it's Wright or Gordon, maybe it lowers the playing time floor for Devon Achane tonight. Just something to think about. Now, as far as non-positional player injuries that we can play in DFS, Miami's missing 2 of their 5 secondary pieces. Storm Duck, he was out last week, their corner, but they're also missing F.A. Melifonwu, their starting safety. So that's 2 of their 5 defensive backs now, which is not great when you're playing the Buffalo Bills. They were missing their nose tackle, Benito Jones, last week. It sounds like he will play, so at least some positive injury news for the Dolphins defense. But, through 2 games, we're already week 3, and the Dolphins have already lost their entire right side of their offensive line. Right, so James Daniels, their right guard, is on injured reserve. Austin Jackson, their right tackle, he is also on injured reserve. So we can say what we want about Mike McDaniel and Tua and how much they are to blame, probably a lot, for what's happened so far. But they're also in the worst possible situation when it comes to how healthy this team is, and it's only 2 weeks into the season. Now, all this to say, that's contributing to the 13, 14-point spread that we're seeing tonight for the Miami traveling to Buffalo, and it's something we have to consider as we're building our lineups for tonight. Now, speaking of Buffalo, Ed Oliver, their nose tackle, he was out last week, their defensive tackle. He's out once again tonight. But perhaps the most impactful injury, because Ed Oliver's injury wasn't too impactful last week, sorry, Jets fans. But Matt Milano, one of their inside linebackers, one of the stars of their defense, he is out with a pec injury tonight. And Joe Buscaglia, one of the best beat reporters in the game, a Bills beat reporter, wrote a fantastic article on The Athletic last night talking about what the absence of Matt Milano means for this defense. And he mentioned that his backup, Dorian Williams, is more prone to falling for the misdirection of Miami's offense, way more prone to jumping up on play action. So if we're looking for some reason to play Dolphins tonight, play more Dolphins in our lineups tonight, it could be the absence of Matt Milano. It means more for Devon Achane, more for Jalen Wright, more for the tight ends, and maybe more for Tyreek and Waddle on those crossing routes. So lots of injuries tonight. And again, these are the reasons we talk about this is because you can adjust your projections, whether it's the Occupy Fantasy Index, whether it's your own projections, or whether you're just doing math in your head. Maybe adjust guys up and down based on defensive injuries because we know for a fact the field does not do this. It's how we end up on guys like Malik Neighbors and maybe even Russell Wilson and Wan'Dale Robinson on Sunday's main slate back in week 2 when we knew Dallas was missing their top corner. So knowing these injuries, while it may seem boring to some of you who are just looking for the picks, they are extremely important when playing DFS. All right, let's move on to low risk contests, 50-50s, double ups, head to heads, where you just have to beat half the field to double your money. And if we think about what's going to happen tonight, we know that the field is going to jam in Josh Allen, incredibly popular at captain. He's been the first guy we put in. Now, we could fit in the two workhorses, Achane and Cook, and play Tua. That leaves us 300 left per player. We can't really get there, right? So we're thinking about what is the safest option tonight. This doesn't work because there aren't enough punts to fit in these two guys, or fit in these four guys. We want to keep Josh Allen at captain based on his floor and ceiling and his likely captain MVP popularity tonight. So we have to get rid of one of Achane, Cook, or Tua. Now, just think to yourself, what feels the safest in a 13-point game environment? Is it Josh Allen? Yes, of course. Is it James Cook as a 13-point favorite? Yes, probably so. Is it Achane? I could see him getting stifled in this game, but also his work in the passing game, 7 targets per game. They used him a lot, even when they're down way late in the game. It feels like Tua is the guy that has the lowest floor of this group, right? We saw 8 points in week 1. That could easily look like tonight in a lopsided matchup if the spread plays out. So if anything, I would probably leave Tua out of this equation, at least 3,300 left per player. We can play guys like Tanner Conner at $800. We can play Ty Johnson at $1,600. We can play Dawson Knox, who's gotten a bunch of targets through 2 games. Ray Davis could get more work here, especially if it's a blowout in the second half. Malik Washington, guaranteed targets at $3,200. So lots of ways you can play this. But I think these are the 3 guys that I would go with on DraftKings. Now on FanDuel, you can actually make it work with all 4. Allen, let's put Allen in the MVP spot. Achane, James Cook, and Tua. That leaves 20-50 left per player, which is a lot more, just even considering the salary differences on both sides, a lot more than on DraftKings. And you could play Tanner Conner 1,600. You could play Dawson Knox next. Or you could go down even further and play Alec Ingold and move further up. Either way, I think this is the way you want to go. You can actually fit in all 4 guys here tonight. And it's not like we're missing out on any star pass receivers for Buffalo, even though we do expect Keon Coleman to be relatively popular at $8K on FanDuel. I still think this is the way to go on FanDuel. And again, if you're not into Tua and you want to go the same route as DraftKings, you can remove Tua, you can pair up Keon Coleman with Josh Allen, and you can figure it out from there. All right, pretty straightforward slate, I think, so far. But high-risk contest is where we make all the money, and it's where we put all of our angles into effect. So let's go back to DraftKings, and let's get a water sip break, and then we'll talk about the strategies for how you win the biggest prizes tonight. If you've been watching through 2 weeks, you know what to do in the comments. If you're new here or you haven't been following the comments, just watch the comments, and you can follow along on how to help support the channel. All right. So, high-risk contests, leagues, GPPs, satellites. This is where you have to beat a lot of people to win a lot of money. And typically, you need some different ideas, some lower-owned plays to help you get to the top of those leaderboards. So, I'll give you some ideas tonight. The first thing we have to think about here is that there will be, naturally, in projections, even the best projections, too heavy of an emphasis on the first 2 games of the season. Because look at what Buffalo did. Absolute crazy game in week 1 against Baltimore, and then a complete blowout against the Jets last week. You look at Miami, they got blown out in week 1, and then had a competitive game in week 2. So the average of those 2 games is what some projections and most projections will rely on, when we know that the odds of this game being a normal game is pretty unlikely in terms of being close and competitive. So keep that in mind as you're building. Because just think about this for the Bills offense, right? 46 pass attempts in week 1 for Josh Allen against the Baltimore Ravens. He did not eclipse 40 pass attempts in a single game last year, all 17 games. In fact, he hasn't eclipsed 40 pass attempts since week 12 of 2023. So looking at the raw targets and the raw air yards for the guys in those games, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Joshua Palmer, is going to lead to some elevated ownership tonight because Buffalo, under this offensive coordinator, wants to run the ball at heart. Even though they were trailing in that game, if you look at neutral script run rate or pass rate over expectation, basically when the game is within 7 points, how often do teams run the ball or pass the ball compared to what the league average is? Buffalo is even below that. They want to run the ball more than league average. In fact, you look at last week, their pass rate was negative 7.5% over expected, which means they ran the ball 7.5% more than league average in neutral situations, which was bottom 4 in the league. Even if you factor in week 1 when they were trailing most of the game, they're still bottom 9 in the league in neutral script pass rate. So this is a team that wants to run the ball. That's good for James Cook and Ray Davis and maybe Ty Johnson, but probably not. He's more of a passing down back. But it also means we're probably overinflated on projections on Josh Allen's passing game and all the Bills receivers. And I think I look at Keon Coleman here with a pretty hefty projection and pretty hefty ownership projection as a guy who is probably benefiting from that week 1 outlier passing performance. So again, these are all things we have to consider. We have to look at context to stats and what leads into this game. All right. As a result, because of Buffalo being heavy favorites tonight, 13, 14-point favorites, Bills will naturally lean towards Buffalo. So 4 Bills in the lineup, 5 Bills in the lineup. Is it enough? That's the question. If they're that big of favorites and we see a Tua implosion and they score 10, 14 points, should we be playing more 4-2 and 5-1 Buffalo lineups in the field? I mean, probably so. The problem is there are some good value plays on Miami's side that if Buffalo blows out and they're not passing a ton and Miami is passing, it's easy to see how Malik Washington at $3,200 or Jalen Wright gets more work at $2,800 or even Ollie Gordon at $2,200 in large field GPPs or Julian Hill or Tanner Conner, these guys down here, and how they can outscore guys like Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, Dawson Knox, Elijah Moore in a game where Buffalo controls. So as a result, when we see something like that, the builds actually end up more balanced, lineup builds, lineup constructions, 3-3s and even 4-2s, because of the game script, because of how the values play out. So while we know the field is going to build Buffalo heavy, the more I look at it and the more things that I run, it's probably in the right set. And I really don't know if there's an edge one way or the other of trying to play more Bills in the lineup or playing more balanced, because I think based on the value plays, it's actually pretty correct with what the field is doing right now. All right, what else can we talk about? I will say, given the 14-point spread, they do have an elevated price tag, but the Bills defense, we have projected for like 12 or 13% ownership. If that holds, that's probably too low, right? Seeing what Tua has done, given just natural defensive performances when the spread is 2 touchdowns. The one thing I'm concerned about is casual players clicking in hand-building lineups tonight. They've seen Tua play. And we've seen situations like this where we project a defense that's really expensive at $5,800 on DraftKings. And casual builders bump up their ownership and they get over 20%, sometimes even over 5% on captain. Look on FanDuel. Bills defense. Scroll down here. Bills defense is, 7,400, same as the kicker, nearly the same as Keon Coleman. So they'll still probably stay somewhat lower owned, but don't be shocked if they do get steamed by casual players tonight. I think it's worth a shot though, playing more Bills than 20% of your lineups if the game script holds. All right, other ideas here. Let's just look at, just really quickly, if we're looking at receivers in this game, what are their expected fantasy points per game through 2 games? And again, this is average, and I know this is not what I said earlier. We have to consider game scripts in effect, but we look at average or expected fantasy points per game. This is where the ball has been thrown to them, how often, how far downfield, where on the field. We look at Tyreek Hill, expected 14 fantasy points per game through 2 games. Jalen Waddle, 9 expected fantasy points. Malik Washington, 5, which is really impactful at $3,200. On the Buffalo side, Keon Coleman, 12, which if he's going to be 40% owned, that's not a ton of points. Maybe at 6,800, 8,000 on FanDuel, I get it. But if this game goes in the other direction, Khalil Shakir, just 8 fantasy points expected per game through 2 games. But Joshua Palmer, nearly the same as Keon Coleman where's Joshua Palmer? There you are, $4,800. 11 expected fantasy points per game, so just 1 point less than Keon Coleman. We get a pretty massive discount in terms of salary and ownership on Palmer versus Keon Coleman tonight. All right, the final thing, the decision we have to make is, do we play Josh Allen at captain? We have him at 35% projected ownership at captain on DraftKings, 60% on FanDuel. So this is our first slate of the season where we make the decision if we're making multiple lineups. Do we go all in on Josh Allen, or do we fade Josh Allen and mix in all these other guys and get overweight on them? I would say, and this is going to be extremely scary, but for high-risk contests, you're making multiple lineups, I think the right way to go is to fade Allen tonight, given the fact that his passing numbers are likely skewed from week one, given the fact that he may not have to pass the ball a ton, and given the fact that they want to run the ball. Yes, can he run for multiple touchdowns? Absolutely. Can he be the optimal captain? Yes, that's why he's 35% on DraftKings, 60% on FanDuel. But tonight's the night, I think, to fade Josh Allen if you're mass multi-entry him, 20 plus lineups. Even if you're building small field lineups, you want to get Josh Allen in all of them or a couple. I totally understand. Maybe if you're building two sets, you're building some mass multi-entry, you're playing small field. Maybe just allow Josh Allen in your small field and fade him in your large field contest. It's interesting, but I think if we can get overweight on Achane and his target share, James Cook and his massive touchdown upside, Tyreek caught a long ball for the first time in seemingly a decade last week. Maybe that opens him up. Jalen Waddle, Keon Coleman, Shakir, or maybe you play a mid-range captain to fit in one extra stud and you think this game's competitive. Either way, I think it's the way to go tonight. So it's going to be scary, and the most likely outcome is Josh Allen being optimal captain or MVP. But if he's not, and you're overweight on all these other guys in your lineups, now you have a real shot to get to the top of leaderboards. So that'll do it for here. Make sure you go check out our daily plug after this. Bismo, our writer at OccupyFantasy.com, he'll have different thoughts than I will. Go read his slate thoughts, his lineup construction tips, his rankings for tonight. That'll give you maybe a different set of ideas. That's at OccupyFantasy.com, normally up by early afternoon. Our Occupy model is already up and running with projected ownership for tonight for both FanDuel and DraftKings, the single game contest. And so is our lineup builder. Allows you to build up to 300 lineups. It's great for a night like tonight. It's great for all slates. But like if you're looking for how to build with and without Josh Allen, putting in rules into our lineup builder and then running different sets of lineups, giving you ideas to see what's possible. You may look to fade Josh Allen. You say, I don't like any of these lineups. And you lock Josh Allen. You say, well, I actually like these lineups. I can get in some low-owned players and be okay with it. So great tool to use. Again, as low as $7 per week. Links in the description below, OccupyFantasy.com. We would love to have you. Any questions, drop a comment below. Make sure to subscribe here on the YouTube channel. It's free to do so. You'll get notified when we go live, upload any video. So for Occupy, I'm Brian. Thank you for listening, and good luck and enjoy tonight's Bills and Dolphins Showdown slate.